Good afternoon. It is Monday afternoon, March 23rd, and we are moving into the third week of SMG 401 Sport Economics. And we're doing it in a very interesting time. For many of us, this is uh, either the first or second week of maybe some enforced working at home, some things that we're all not used to. It's a little bit oddball that this is Monday afternoon, the first Monday in springtime, according to the calendar, and when spring sports should be really getting on, and I should be just coming back from spring break training and ready to get into the regular conference season this week in spring sports in college, and all spring sports are canceled. So it's just a really oddball time, especially as I'm looking out the window and it's snowing. And ground is covered with snow, my deck is covered with snow, my car is covered with snow, everything is covered with snow. Things just aren't what we would think of as normal. But last week we had, I think, a fairly spirited discussion because our online class does go on. Our format hasn't changed, and even though it has, for many universities, this is their first foray into massive amounts of online learning, and it's going to be quite an experience for a lot of people. But we kind of go along as planned and do what we need to do and do it in the way we were intending to do it. So, what's going on this week? Well, we're going to transition from last week. Last week we talked about basically business models. No, not really. We talked about business goals. We talked about why does a franchise, a team, what should be their goal? What's their economic reality? What is their reason for being? And you see that there are some competing theories about it, where if you emphasize profitability and the business, then the sporting side will follow. Some theories say exactly the opposite. If you emphasize win maximization, then the business and economic results will follow. But what I was trying to hope that people got out of there, what I was trying to do, was emphasize that there is a difference between being profitable and building value, and that the most successful franchises actually do both. But value creation is where the real benefit comes out. Now, do you create value without some level of profitability? No, it's not sustainable. But you see things like the list of the Forbes franchises, the ones that are truly successful, that truly actually grow in value continually over time, are teams that are very profitable. Most are at least moderately successful. Some are very successful. And if you really look up and down that list, you'll find that some have jumped up around the time of their success and then fallen off when they're not very good. Yet the most valuable ones seem to be fairly steady through thick and thin of competitive success. So those are some interesting things. And one thing I must comment on, though, okay? When you're doing the discussions, when you're considering the material, I'm going to ask you, just like I did last week, make sure you're looking at it from an economic and a business perspective. Look at it from a big picture. You can't look at it as a sports fan. And also, you need to drop some of the preconceived notions that we've all had, because we think of sports in terms of our individual experience. So when we talk about ticket prices, when we talk about attending a game, when we talk about the fan experience, when we talk about our support for a team, we tend to relate it back on what our personal experiences have been. Okay? We have to take ourselves out of that picture. It's almost like you're sitting in a helicopter and drawing yourself up and looking down over the sports world. Look at it that way. I want you to look at it as though you were the owner of a franchise, or a governor of a state in which a franchise is located. What's the economic benefit to my community? A league commissioner who has the responsibility not for a single team but for maybe 30. Look at it from that perspective. It's going to make more sense to you, and I think you'll understand the economics and the business if you take yourself out of that role of the sports fan. It's very hard to do. For instance, this last weekend, without any last 2 weekends, to be honest, without any live televised sports, how many of you felt as lost as I did? when you wanted to break the boredom, you wanted to break out of your house because we've been sort of confined in this local quarantine, if you will. What did we always do? We break out and we go into it in search of sports, and we haven't had that. So it just, I know it's tough, but you've got to break out of that sports fan mentality. I can't stress that enough. Okay, this week we're going to move on, and we're going to look at something, really exciting sounding. Industrial organization of sports. Doesn't sound too thrilling, well, it doesn't. But it's very important. And the big thing we're going to look at is the concepts of monopoly. Okay, monopoly, as you know, is not just the name of an old game. Monopoly is an economic concept. Monopoly essentially means there's one seller, okay? One source for a product. And if we look at it, are sports organized on the principle of monopoly? For instance, is the NFL a monopoly? Is Major League Baseball a monopoly? Well, you might not argue, that no, there's other ways I can watch baseball, but is top level the best quality baseball available from multiple sources, or is it available from one? That's the kind of thing we want to look at. The other thing we want to look at the same time is the concept of labor relations. Now, this has been in the news recently because it actually forced some of the material you see in the unit into becoming overnight a little bit outdated, although that's so similar for so many things that are happening right now, because when those materials were added in the summer of 2019, we were anticipating the negotiations between the NFLPA, the NFL Players Association, and the National Football League for their upcoming collective bargaining agreement might go through a longer time frame, and yet the negotiations concluded a little bit early, and a new collective bargaining agreement was just concluded, accepted, and ratified by the players and the owners. What has this done? This has added a 17th game. This has created different practice conditions. Many work rules, so to speak, are now different in football than they were just a couple of weeks ago. But it's how football at the highest level is organized. And it does make a difference, and it's all involving who is getting the most value from the arrangements that have been made. So maybe we'll have to shift gears a little bit, and maybe we can add some questions and some thoughts about the new collective bargaining agreement and find a way to work them into the discussion this week. But this week's material is heavily based on these ideas of monopoly, of the organization of leagues, the organization of teams, and the cooperation between players and owners in these league situations. So it's not the most exciting stuff in the world, but it might be some of the most important as it comes to the provision of sports. All right, so I know people's lives have been turned on end. People's lives have been turned upside down. We are all operating under conditions that, for most of us, we have never seen before, we've never experienced before, and all I can do is ask you to do your best to keep up with a normal pattern of participation in this course. For some of us, this may actually be a pleasant diversion from the realities of the world at the moment. So hopefully you can take it with that attitude. Please take advantage of all the continuing support services we have to offer at Post during this time period. Make sure I'm aware if there's any situation that I should be aware of in terms of how your life is maybe affecting the ability to get work done, something like that. Let me know, okay? But if I have one more message for you, it's the one I just gave earlier. Stop being a sports fan. Start being a sport economist. That's what's going to make things better for you over the next few weeks. Okay? Thank you very much, and I look forward to working with you again.